Hello and welcome to Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Josh. And this past week, we had a great time having Ellie on our panel from Earl Grey Books.
Hi, Ellie.
Miss you.
Inevitably, though, Ellie had to go back home to Australia.
How dare she?
And so we got Tori back from Fraggle Rock.
Welcome back.
Even exchange, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so. But a few months ago, we released a Big Book Bowl poll, and each of us nominated a big book to go over on the show. And after the record-breaking amount of 6 votes came in, the winner was Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So we're going to be going over Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Larry, you have the discussion starter?
I do. Okay, so this book was written in the 1870s, I want to say. 1860s, 1870s?
1860s.
1860s even. Older,
Yeah,
longer.
a while ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quite a
A
while.
long time.
A little bit.
And I just want to know if you guys felt the same way I did, that it could have been written about modern-day America.
I
instead
will
of...
agree with you there.
Yeah.
About halfway through, I was sitting there at one point reading. There's a couple characters like idly having a conversation at a dinner table, and I was like, you know what? You change some of the names in here, or even just leave them and like update the whole entire situation. It plays out like a modern day soap opera. I mean, there's
That's how I
intrigue and
felt about
death
it,
and,
yeah.
and
The soap
love
opera is such a
and
good
jilted
word.
lovers, and it surprisingly had a lot of shenanigans. in
First
there,
thing,
so.
to answer the question about the year, was 1866.
Okay.
So, I would agree with the rest of you with regard to it being about... It could very well reflect modern-day America because, in a way, you take away some of the details, and the shell for most political systems is the same.
Mm.
It's just a different, in many cases, a different shell and a different detail, and there's very few shells to actually choose from. So, but I also feel that Raskolnikov, he's a college student, like all of us have been to college. He wants to do something with himself, and he wants to make that great difference in the world, like all of us do. He's just incredibly insane.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And all of
he
us
definitely made the impact in the wrong way.
Extremely depressed, extremely just self-centered.
Yeah.
At times, and then in other times he was very volatile.
But because
I think, in a word.
I know that there's explanations that are given, but first of all, why in the world would you want to kill somebody? And number two, why in the world would you want to kill somebody who isn't that... He makes arguments to why she's a threat to society, but an older woman who's a pawnbroker?
I was gonna say, I feel like, and I have to say that I definitely have to reread this book because I don't know if it was the names or how it was written. I felt very lost in a lot of it.
Yeah,
I got like the basic gist of it, but I totally missed. I was like, why does he want to murder this woman? Like,
because
I couldn't figure out like
desperate and
why
selfish.
he didn't why he wanted to kill her. I was just like,
The
am I missing something? Like, what did she do something?
The explanation that
The explanation evolves throughout the book, where in the beginning it's not crystal clear, but as it goes on, you discover that he had written this paper, right, about this idea.
I liked how they revealed that. That was very well done. I'll credit it that much. That was an interesting read.
Yeah, so he gets this idea, right? And to me, what this book is really about is it's about the danger of ideas. Because he has this idea that there's two classes of people. There's the ordinary type, where law applies, and then there's the advanced Napoleonic type, right? Because he's the one that he uses the most as an example. Right, extraordinary people, exactly. Where the laws of the land don't apply to them, and they can make decisions that ordinary people cannot make in order to advance the greater good.
Yeah, there's the rule followers, and then there's these select few that, like, morally, if they wanted to do whatever they wanted to, like, they're allowed.
Yeah.
Napoleon was also a tyrannical man-child who planned his plot. He plotted in a sandbox.
But that's another soapbox for another day.
But I think that I think that as far as the reason for him killing Alyona
Poor Alyona.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was the other thing that threw me off was keeping track of everybody's names. I was like,
especially since they have several names.
Russian names, though.
Oh,
yeah, that was
Russian.
rough.
The way that Russians use surnames, it's a very interesting.
Well, it wasn't just
story.
surnames. Everybody had at least 4 or 5 different, like, I guess depending on the relationship. This is the only thing that I can think of. It was a cultural difference. Was
In a
depending
way,
on who
yeah.
you were.
Russians, they generally do
reference
that,
each other?
but you know them more by 2 names. Like,
oh my god, the main character had 5! There's Radnya, Ranunya, I'm sorry, I can't remember his...
according to the character guide, which... I don't think
Yeah, no, I'm not even gonna try to say any of the names.
I'd be nowhere without the character
one
guide.
thing, his one friend called him another. He referred to himself at one point as a third name. Somebody else referred to him as his last name. There was his full name was referenced at
his
another
actual
point.
name is Rodion Romanovich Rolskonikov, and his nickname was Rodia.
Say that 10 times fast, guys.
Do you know what happened when I was reading this book? Because everybody had so many different names, and it was the weirdest things. I've never had this happen in the history of me reading anything. Characters became colors. And I know that sounds weird. I was talking about this earlier.
Yeah, you were saying that
Senthanasia. Naturally, or normally, like every so often there's... I'm pronouncing this wrong. Senthanasia. It's when you hear something and like see colors, or like you... look at something and taste something. So it's one sensation triggers another random sensation. It happens almost always with music with me. I've never had it happen while reading. Characters became colors.
Interesting.
Like,
I was thinking when I was reading
say,
it about like it would be good to like highlight the
Like mentally, I did
colors.
that. Like he was hunter green. His mom was like a pale white pearly color. His sister was gold. Like people became colors, and while I was reading the names, like I didn't process the names. They became colors.
Were they random?
Like,
were they randomly
Hunter Green went
applied,
into the...
or did
I
they?
don't know
No,
why.
like, that's great.
Were they randomly applied, or did you apply it based off of a?
Like I read the name, and as I was reading the character, like they became. The more frequently I read the name, like they became that color. Like Donya, his sister, was like a goldenrod color. And, like, the 4th or 5th time I read her name, she was, like, I couldn't unsee it. Like, those were the colors that I saw in my brain every single time I read them. Like,
It's actually not a half bad idea, because usually, like, when I'm
and
reading
I didn't
a
do it on
book...
purpose, like, legitimately. Like, well, this is what happens when you read, I guess, Crime and Punishment at, like, 2 o'clock in the morning.
That's a terrible time
I guess
to
that's
read
what happened.
Crime and Punishment.
Well, when you're a busy lady. But, yeah, no. So, like, legitimately, like, Peter, the vain love interest, he was like a dove gray, like legitimately the most random colors, but people got assigned different colors throughout the entire story. It was so weird. I couldn't stop it once it started.
Yeah, no,
That was the
maybe
only way I
should
was like,
try that
oh,
with this
okay,
one.
now I understand who's who. And it was the weirdest thing.
I think going back to the pawnbroker.
Yeah, and
to
why?
the
Right?
murder.
Why?
Allegedly, she's described as per page 64 in my Barnes & Noble Classics book as being, she is first rate. You can always get money from her. She is as rich as a Jew. She can give you 5,000 at a time, but she is not above taking a pledge for a ruble. Lots of our fellows have had dealings with her, but she is an awful old harpy. And she's also described as being spiteful and propitious, and
Well, yeah, I mean,
she
like,
was a
that
stickler for getting her payment.
describes how she is, but, like, what specifically did she do to the main character that was like, I'm gonna kill that
She was
person?
a scapegoat. She was an
she was a
easy
scapegoat.
target.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that
she
I
was
wasn't
an
the
easy
only
enough
one that was
target,
like-
but a hag to
there
the
was no
point
real
that
Okay.
she didn't really I think she just annoyed people and
yeah,
burdened people.
There was no personal affront to him that was like specific. It was just she was an individual who kind of was a person to go to when you were down on your luck. He didn't have money. He didn't have funds. He was hypoglycemic. He was malnourished. Mm-hmm. He was not thinking properly. So he saw as a target, as a physical, tangible individual that he can lash out at, because when you're in that kind of situation, there's not a lot of like tangible things when you are hungry and poor and destitute. Like, so that was...
I was looking for like a personal reason. I'm like, where is it? There has to be some sort of reason that he just, because as
he kind of drummed it up.
But I feel that anything
he kind of drummed it up, and also
I'm like, I don't get it.
But it also comes back to that idea that he had, and he actually got this idea published in some journal, where he, like I said, he came up with these two classes of people. This idea about the two classes of people, and then at some point, he wondered if he was which one he belonged to.
Yeah.
And the only way that he could know was to break the rules to such a large degree and see if he survived it.
But also that same article that he wrote kind of damned him, because it said in the article, the one detective character...
Fiore, probably.
Yeah, was like, oh, well, it's very interesting, like... in your article, you say that folks who are unable to be properly able to, like, murder someone, like, the physical, a somatic manifestation of, like, the stress presents itself. And conveniently, you were sick around the same time that, the pawnbroker went missing and was killed. Very strange how that happens, and the way he kind of, like, lays everything out is very, like... He shot himself in the foot preemptively.
No, Fiore is like an 1860s Columbo. I love him. He's brilliant.
Yeah,
he was a cool character.
All these mind games that were going on between him and Raskolnikov and the person that they placed the blame on. Zazimov was the doctor.
Dimitri?
No, there was Zazimov, and then there was...
Mikulka was the one that was accused.
Is that the Zosim?
He was a painter.
Zazu, right?
Zazimov was... He's Rodia's doctor. He's Raskolnikov.
There was another Z named dude, though, and I can't remember...
It was like Z-O-S-S-O-M-I, something like that.
Z-O-S-S-M... he's the doctor.
Oh, okay. See, like,
another Z name.
The names got me.
Zarnitsin.
There!
That's Raskolnikov's landlady.
Nope, never mind. I was reading the wrong name then. I got
and he was also engaged to her daughter, and
he did a lot of very strange things. His character, Radya, was a very, very strange bird to begin with, and I did things with no real reasons. He kind of did whatever he thought about the top of his head and was very impulsive. And it wasn't until after the fact, when like the consequences came to surface, came to light, that he either like pawned the reason off to somebody else or pawned the reason off as like a fault in himself. He really kind of didn't take a lot of responsibility for a lot of the stuff that he did at first, at any rate. It seemed to me, reading it, was just a lot of, I was sick, I was mad, they think this about me, they think this about me, so that's why I'm going to do it. So
that's why I feel that his reasons for wanting to kill the pawnbroker were clearer at the beginning, because after that, he was sick, he was regretful, he was making remarks about how this was part of an experiment, and then he started trying to make excuses saying, we're better off without her anyway.
Yeah, there was a lot of backpedaling.
So it becomes it becomes a bit more vague.
No, I disagree. I think it gets clearer.
It gets clearer.
As that explanation is given.
It gets clearer based off of gathering all the details, but he becomes far more unreliable. He becomes more... In a way, he becomes more complicated as the work progresses.
One would think double homicide with an axe would become,
Yeah, I mean,
more complicated.
I
digress.
Really,
because he's got to make excuses for himself, and got to give other people. I mean, he confesses to one part. He confesses to
Sonia.
Yeah, Sonia. Yeah, he confesses to Sonia, and then he finally confesses at the right before the epilogue that he was the one that did it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
as he has to, he has no choice, right? Because it's kind of laid out with the other character, the other kind of immoral dude in there. What was his name?
Oh,
He's like.
The one, you mean the painter that was accused?
No.
Oh yeah, I gave up on
Svidrigailov.
His sister's
the one that
Tormentor?
was yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, I was gonna say the guy that
Yeah.
was like really mean to what's her face, like how he was like threatening her.
Svidrigailov, yeah.
Yeah, him.
He's a fascinating character to me because
he was what an introduction.
I like when Dunya went after
Yeah.
him.
Hi, you don't know me. Do you believe in ghosts?
no sense of boundary, right?
Oh, by the way, I'm
just
gonna give
walks
you
into his room while he's sleeping and
It's like,
sits
oh,
down
did I
next to
wake
him.
you?
No, he's like, you weren't really
I've
sleeping.
seen my dead wife. Like,
Oh, back up, dude. Back up.
He's like, you're not even really sleeping.
yeah.
You know, he's like, you're faking it. He's like the Cheshire Cat kind of in a way. It kind of reminded me of in an
just shows
introduction.
up.
A little whimsical
He's like-
in his.
In
I
his
mean, I
everything.
guess that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Whimsical.
That's a little bit
Yeah.
a morbid whimsical, but like a morbid whimsy. But
He's like, we're gonna be great friends. He has a feeling that the two of them are
cut
gonna be
from the
great
same
friends.
cloth.
Yeah.
And I, yeah.
Plus, he read the article too, so he thinks that he has an idea about what this guy thinks about morality in general, and how it applies only to certain people, and he definitely sees himself as somebody who it does not apply to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And he's willing to dabble in practically anything that would be deemed not good, including marrying children.
Wasn't she like 13?
Something
Nope.
like that.
Nope.
Something like that.
She was young enough.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't at that point in
Consent
time
was much
wasn't.
younger
Yeah, I
back
was about to
then.
say.
Oh, but his attitude toward it made it so, right? Because he was like, and their parents just let her sit on my lap and all this kind of like greasy,
He was-
creepy
yeah.
shit.
He was
Yeah.
not
That
a
was
cool
like-
dude.
No. He's like, it's a child bride and I like it. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, oh, it's just socially acceptable. He was like, he was attracted to the
Child.
the wrongness
Yeah.
of it.
Not so much that he was getting a bride, but so much that it was a child.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that crystallized right until the very end, right? Just before he kills himself and he has that nightmare about finding the 5-year-old in the hotel, and it brings her into the room. It's like the last dream he has. So he finds this 5-year-old, figures that she's being beaten by the hotel owner, brings her into the room, puts her on the bed, and then discovers that she's just pretending to be sleeping. And then she gets like a grin on her face, like starts coming toward him as a sexual advance. And then he's like, Jesus, she's 5. And he slaps her away, wakes up, walks out in the middle of the street, shoots himself in the head. Because of the fact that he's descending. He is descending. He's falling further and further away from
That
God.
demoralization, yeah.
Is what it is. I mean, that's what. I mean, it's obvious. This is a Christian book. It's written in a very Christian way about.
I will agree with you. Yeah. Religion is a strong factor without being like hit you over the head.
No, yeah, it's not. Yeah,
It's actually very strongly like
Christian.
Christian morality is a
Not just morality, but the description of the kind of the human condition is very akin to what Paul talks about, especially in Romans, about how our you turn away from God and you become more and more sinful. You're just turned over to it to the point where you will accept any kind of immoral act, do any kind of immoral act until the end of life, right? It's just a gradual descent. Or a fast descent, depending on how you approach, the turn away. So for him, it was suicide. And for Raskolnikov, it was, in the end, salvation through, faith.
acceptance in his in his actions.
And Sonia's presence really helped as well. Cause,
Well, yeah, she's kind of the salt of the earth
yeah.
type, right? From the same biblical perspective.
Yeah.
She's his confessor. And it's interesting, too, that scene when he confesses to her and has her read about Lazarus to him. And on the other side of the door is Svengali, or whatever his name is. Right? He's right on the other side of the door there for that, listening and eavesdropping. And so he's kind of bearing witness to it. And then when it comes time to do the most drastic thing, I think even the fact that he bore witness to that testimony and the advice that she gave to Raskolnikov in that situation. And then he's got Raskolnikov's sister alone in the house and is basically trying to blackmail her with the knowledge of the brother's murder. And she pulls out a gun.
Oh, she gets a good piece of him, too.
Yeah, she takes the side off his face a little bit. And
she's cool. She's an upright gal.
Yeah.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
Get it.
And then could have killed him, didn't. And then he could have raped her, didn't. Let her go. And barely. And I think, and then he goes next door and, he starts giving away all his money and everything before he ends up killing himself. And I think all of that is basically just the witnessing of what happened between Sonia and Raskolnikov, I think, led him to do at least some good acts, or at least not painfully evil ones, before he had to take his own life.
It just makes me think of the show that's out now, The Good Place, where it asks and tries to answer the questions of, like, does a life of, like, terrible actions and then just before the end of your life doing something extraordinarily good, does that balance that out in the end? It's a really good it's a Mike Schur show. He's the guy behind Ted Danson, Kristen Bell. He's the guy who was behind Parks and Rec. It's a brilliantly written show, and it does a very good job with, like, towing the line with religion versus morality and it asks a lot of hard-hitting actual philosophical questions, and that's what kind of made me think of that was, that question of how does one live one's life if you leave it, like, terrible and selfish, and if you do one good thing at the end of it, does that balance it out?
What's the show called again?
It's called The Good Place. Sorry, I'm really good at tangents. The Good Place. I'm trying to tell everybody to watch it because it's a fascinating show.
Yeah, I saw a few episodes of that in the first season.
It goes some weird places, but
the Christian answer to that question.
Besides the point. Sorry.
The Christian answer to that question would be no, right? The only thing that saves you is faith in Jesus. And then what happens is after you believe in Jesus and that he died and lived and that eternal life is yours if you follow him, what happens is you can start to become sanctified, which means that you become a better person while you live here. It's the process of shedding your sinful nature and being born again. So that would be the Christian perspective on that. Would be no. It's not. Christianity is not a works-based system. It says we're all miserable, we're all worthless, we're all incapable of righteousness. So the only hope is the fact that Jesus died for us, and through that, he made us redeemable, but only through the faith.
Alrighty then.
Okay.
Do we have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks for having us read it, Larry.
So I'm guessing you're not going to be giving it a very high rating here at the end?
Oh, what gave you that thought?
My final thought is this. I think I got more reading The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, that's
unfortunate. I think that Crime and Punishment... I think The Telltale Heart is Crime and Punishment condensed, abridged, with a maniacal character, and...
Interesting.
Much... It depicts a mad person much more eventful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like there are other stories that take
well,
the
you're
same...
missing the point then, right? Like, that's what I'd say. Because, I mean, the telltale heart, in the end, is... What? He gets, I guess, caught, right? He gets found
He
out.
confesses because
Yeah.
the police don't know.
He goes mad.
He's able to cover himself pretty
Yeah.
well, but he hears the heart beating
Right.
from what he thinks is below the floorboards. And the cops are just about ready to wrap up, and the speaker, he confesses because he can't take the...
He outs himself.
the beating of the heart anymore. And he tells him, I did it, I killed him. Pull up the floorboards, that's where you'll find him. Chopped up, but that's where you'll find him.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, well, I would say that there's a lot more going on here, obviously.
I think it's an interesting character study.
No,
think
it's more than that.
And I think that there's things that you can get out of it, but I think that...
well, that's your point of view on it. So,
Yeah, if you're looking for something, if you're looking for a story with substance, I'd pick The Telltale Heart over Crime and Punishment.
there are shorter...
You're saying there's no substance? I
There's-
mean,
it-
I
there's
think
it's
substance.
I think
Yeah,
that it's
but-
about
it's
ideas.
a depiction of human nature, is what it is.
It is a depiction of human nature, but it's all about it's driven on ideas because the characters I felt were quite wooden. I didn't think that I think that there were eventful things that happened to them, and they made some interesting choices, but the way that they were presented
There
was
plot
to
devices.
me
It was like,
Yeah.
this thing happened, what's going to happen? This
They
thing
were
happened, what's going to happen?
to me it was
I kind of agree.
they were presented very woodenly.
It didn't feel as organic as some of the other things that I will agree with you that I've read for, literary gladiators. Did it have substance? Absolutely. There was 500 and odd some pages of
Substance.
some freaking substance in there, and
It's longer!
it's a long story, and I don't have...
So does a textbook too.
I was just gonna say, I don't have I'm not finding fault with the length. I'm not somebody who's like, oh, big, thick book, whoa. But it was just, like, it got to a point where it was like, okay, so... what, it's, I don't know, it's kind of like when you have a television series that goes on for ad infinitum, it's like...
I dispute that all. I was
dispute it has
crying at
substance?
the end. No, I mean, I was very emotional about it. I thought it was really well written. I didn't find it.
I think
Well,
the
there's
ending-
certain
I mean, it's about
portions
Russians.
That were well
The way
written.
that it ended was a bit
It's about Russians.
was a bit better,
They're a
but
bit wooden.
the way
Keeps moving that way.
it was also a bit.
What?
I promise
I
won't
think
smack you.
Larry's demonstrating that he's a lone wolf for
Yeah.
this discussion. How would we rate it? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted. Larry.
I'm going to go a perfect 5 out of 5. As we started the discussion, with the discussion starter, I said, does this remind you guys of modern day America? You guys agreed. So I think we can take a lesson from it because of the fact that it is St. Petersburg in 1866 is similar to, let's say, New York City in 2018. I feel like we're in danger of having happened to what our culture, what happened to the Russian culture in the 20th century. So I would say let's keep this book on the shelves, and like I said, 5 out of 5 for me.
That's it.
I'm gonna go with a 3 just because I found it a little difficult to follow. I was having a lot of trouble with the names and I got confused a lot about what was going on. It is a very, or I felt it was a very dense read. At least for me it was. And I plan to reread it, especially now that we've had this discussion. I feel like it might help me
those thoughts in
along.
mind, yeah.
Yeah, it might help me along a little bit more. But like you were saying before, like to sit down and focus on it instead of like trying to get through it for like by a certain date, maybe I can like take my time with it. What I did understand, I did enjoy. So I'm gonna give it a 3. That rating might change later on after I reread it, but for now, I'd say a 3.
I give it 2.5 hat flips. I just...
There we
No,
go.
Perfect. While I absolutely agree with you, it is a wonderful critique on intellectualism. I felt that it was clunky at times, it was inorganic at times, and I definitely will agree with you. It's something that I want to be able to sit down and kind of take my time instead of, rush through it and read it and try to put that really critical lens on sometimes what can happen with like this kind of stuff, is where you're sitting there and you're trying to read it and process it and what do you think about it and you dissect it. And I feel like this is such a chunky volume of work that I would really love to be able to sit back and enjoy again. So it's definitely something that I'm going to reread. I didn't necessarily enjoy it at first blush, but would I say, knock it out of the next person's passer's butt? I mean, if you pass somebody with that in their hands, good on you, but like, don't run around and start burning the book. But, take it off the shelves! Yeah, don't go flip hats over it. But I did it for you. But it wasn't my favorite, I'll say that much. So 2.5.
I'm giving it a 3, because it is something that I would be willing to re-examine, but I also felt that it was very dense and it was very wooden. I think that I just feel that it definitely warrant. I gave it a great amount of time.
Yeah, I feel like maybe
but
if
I think that there were just mechanics that, and it was also very. It was very. It was there was a lot of fourth wall make mention, especially.
Side note: the weird use of the narrative kind of got weird, because it would be third person limited, and then all of a sudden it would start following somebody else, and then it wouldn't be as limited because it would start following somebody else. It became kind of.
I think the way that
the confusion.
The way that the way that the book ended, it was as follows. But that is the beginning. But that is the beginning of a new story, the story of the gradual renewal of a man, the story of his gradual regeneration, of his transition from one world into another, and his initiation into a new unknown life. That might be the subject of a new story, but our present story is over. Which, I guess that's something that more classic works have done, and I know that the way that C.S. Lewis ended the Chronicles of Narnia was very
it's an
much
old school
like that.
way of like, it's a recounting. It's I'm the narrator telling you a story, and we read something else recently that was like that, and it kind of made me think of that. The Walk.
Yeah,
kind of made me think of that, but
The Walk, though, I think is a different kind of work.
Oh no, I'm not saying genre-wise, but the use
Crime
of
and
it
Punishment,
being
I expected more.
very different.
Where I think Dostoevsky is going with that ending is, again, it comes back to the born again, the two lives, right? You have the
like
life,
a literal born again, yeah.
Well, yeah. You have the life before Christ, life after Christ. So those are the two lives. So that was, the story of a pre-Christian, and then the next story would be the story of a converted Christian. Just going back real quick, since you did just read that from the epilogue, that last line. The other thing in the epilogue that I thought was really interesting was the dream that he had, where you have people, where everybody is putting themselves at the center where God belongs, right? So everybody's kind of like making themselves their own gods, and what happens? The whole world breaks down. From the militaries, the armies start going against each other, but then even the armies start turning on each other and saying, "Well, no, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this," because nobody's aligning themselves to up, right? They're just aligning themselves according to their own
moral compass.
But that's also the argument of divinity is within, too.
What do you mean?
The fact that the self is divine. That was
Luciferianism.
Existentialism and
Luciferianism.
Depends on how Lucifer. That would be wouldn't that be the worshipping of Lucifer?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But it's also the worship of self, right? Like if you ask a Satanist, "Are you a Satanist? Do you believe in Satan?" They'll say, "No, I'm an atheist."
No,
but I think I'm the most.
No, the Satanic Bible does preach that by all means help other people, but you can't help other people if you don't help yourself first. And
those are
all
two
about
separate.
Self-love.
Yeah,
they're two separate
Take care of
things.
yourself.
Satanism and
similar,
Lucifer.
they're similar, but
Lucifer,
I think they are.
I would say
separate.
that is an element to it, but
It's
there's
self-love.
a few. There are other
Self-love,
theories
self-worship.
where the self is divine.
It's different levels and different, I think, intensities and meaning of it. behind that, I think. I don't know full well about that, but I think they're like two separate things.
Alrighty then. If you're interested in checking out Crime and Punishment, aside from Larry,
Yes, I am interested, Josh.
Do tell me.
you can find, this is a book that I got from Barnes & Noble. It was $8.95.
You can also find it on Project Gutenberg for Frizzle.
And in the complete opposite direction, you can find it on Audible.
Also, yeah, that helped a little bit
Yeah.
with the names, because I do have it on.
And I'm also going to leave a link down below to...
but still left me confused.
my,
Yeah, I mean, maybe I read it on Audible, so maybe I would have been more confused if it was just on the page. Because it's a lot of dialogue too.
Both. I did both.
Oh, it's
You did
like
both.
I had to,
It's
I had
it's
it
a
reading
chunky
it to me
boy.
because I couldn't figure out the names. Like that's how lost with the names I was. I'm
I
like,
told you, my brain kind of short circuited. I was like, you are a color.
I'm going to
girl.
leave a link down below to Jay Hennicke's discussion about Crime and Punishment, which he, when he made a guest contribution to our channel, he talked about Crime and Punishment, and it was a good video.
I haven't seen it. No, I gotta watch that.
You know, we gotta watch it.
But thank you for tuning in to another episode of Literary Gladiators, and for now, keep reading.
bye.
With
Your phone.
Cliff's Notes, yeah, online.
Thank you, Project Gutenberg. That's how I read the whole entire thing. Of Frizzle.
You read it online?
Yeah, got Project Gutenberg. I found it on Project Gutenberg.
I'm sure it's there.
I keep on pushing
We're
that.
rolling.
It's okay. I'm going to be editing this eventually, so. Hey,
Hello.
future me.
Sup?
Hello,
Sorry.
Okay.
We're done.
We're good.
and...
Hi, you don't know me. Do you believe in ghosts?
Alrighty then.
Okay.
Do we have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Thanks for having us read it, Larry.